Today we're going to have a look at developing an iPad team and everything that goes around the process of doing that. Yeah, let's go for it.
Welcome to another episode of These Are Not the Apps You're Looking For. I'm Jay.
And I'm James.
And today we're going to look at how you develop an iPad team for your school. So to kick things off, James, why do you think it's important to develop a team around you?
I think more than anything, really, it's the support that you can give each other throughout the whole process. So you're going to have people at various different stages, and understanding of using technology and all that kind of stuff. And basically, it's just a support group to help everybody sort of develop and move forward. I think without it, or without a team or a group of people like that, you're going to be pretty much in isolation, developing things off in random directions, and it doesn't kind of bring the whole thing together.
Yeah, so a lot of the point is, isn't it? So if you're the project leader, what happens 9 times out of 10 is that you as a project leader, you get responsibility, or it's your idea to start your iPad project. Yeah. And your role could be head teacher, deputy head, ICT coordinator, or just class teacher. Varies, across every school we see. But yeah, you're in it alone, essentially. So, from start to finish, from getting the iPads to set them up, to figuring out how they're going to be used in the classroom, to helping teachers with challenges, to training them up, to get students ready. All these roles are going to fall on your responsibility. So that's probably why it's key to start developing a team around you to share that burden.
Yeah, and I think one of the key things with having a team like that is not just having one type of person within that. So especially within a school environment, that actually you have a cross-section of the leadership team. So you have everyone from the top down, so SLT level. You have classroom teachers, heads of department, heads of faculty, support assistants. If you're looking at primary school, exactly the same, SLT members or people with TLR responsibilities for things, but also your support staff that go alongside that. They're going to use the tech every day, or use parts of it, or even just brush past it, really.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're sort of convinced that we should be looking at forming a team. So we should really look about the types of players we've got in the school to pick from. So there's generally 3 categories of staffers in the school, and we've talked about these previously. So the walkers, the runners, and the sprinters. Yeah. So the analogy is that the walkers, they're slow to adopt technology. They don't want to move from the traditional way of doing things. The runners, they're the sort of majority in the middle. Those guys are they're okay with technology, but they'll wait to be told and prompted to use it in class. They won't sort of blaze a trail. And at the top we've got the sprinters. So those guys are the early adopters, is what they're usually called, isn't it? And they'll pick up the technology, they'll run with it, they'll do loads of fantastic things. Yeah. So probably a lot of schools would probably rely on those early adopters, wouldn't they, to form up their team. Usually the project lead is an early adopter themselves, so they're very excited about using iPads or mobile devices in the classroom. Yeah. So what's one of the dangers of surrounding yourself with other early adopters that you see?
Well, I think there's 2 issues here when we get to this kind of stuff is, the walkers can often be seen as kind of the Luddites, or the people that are holding the project back, and they're not enthusiastic. Well, actually, from what I've found is, they're the ones that have got the most refined teaching process. They're the ones that kind of sit and wait to see what's going on, and fad technologies they don't usually get involved in.
Yeah, and I suppose they're not swayed by technology, are they? Because
exactly,
they've got a set way of doing things that gets results.
Yeah, exactly. It's a proven thing. But then the other end of the scale is then the sprinters, the people that go off, tend to be the people that I've met along doing these kind of things, tend to be sort of creative people, very excited. That they test these things out, and they're quite willing to try and fail at stuff. I think the difficulty with keeping those groups separate, and certainly having the kind of evangelists, if you like, leading the project, is there's a big gap between how the devices are used within the school, within the classroom, and how the workflows work and all this kind of stuff. I think with the sprinters, they've got the enthusiasm, but maybe they need reining in a little bit, and pulling back and getting the processes sorted. I think the temptation that we've seen with with the initial kind of rollouts is having loads of apps and loads of things like that going off.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I think one of the other interesting things I've noticed over the last year as well is that typically people will allocate their staff or people in general into categories.
Yep.
Usually by age. So the early adopters are typically younger.
Yep.
The runners are sort of 20, 30-year-olds, and then older staff get grouped into this Luddite category, and it's just totally not true.
Yep.
From what we've found, a lot of staff who've been teaching for a long time, they may look like a Luddite, but it's maybe the fact that they're not technology confident, but they're just as excited to use it. And then likewise, I'm thinking of the project we worked on when the NQTs were actually the Luddites.
That was an interesting.
And that was a big surprise.
Yeah, that was quite knocked us back a bit, I think, with that one. And again, it's for things and reasons that you just go, what? When teachers say, teachers have been teaching for 20, 30 years, they're quite comfortable with the way that they're presenting and the way they present themselves to other people. They know how they sound, they know how they behave, they're comfortable within their skin. And one thing that I think, we found with that group of NQTs was they were a little bit unsure of the pedagogy. They were quite happy with the tech, but hearing their own voice or having other people hearing their voice, that was the drawback.
Yeah. Well, the point on that one wasn't it that we were creating flip resources, so we were asking them to sort of screencast, use and explain everything, and then narrate over what they were doing, for their maths project.
Yeah.
And they were really hesitant.
Yeah.
And it was kind of that point of, well, this is going out to your students hear your voice every day,
there shouldn't be a problem with it.
Yeah, what's the problem? But they just simply didn't want to do it, did they?
No, and that was the really cool thing with we then went in on the second or third time we went to a session. And I was kind of thinking, well, the older teachers, the ones, and they were very close to retirement. I think there was a few years away. And I was panicking more about them. And actually, they were sat there, recording and have no issue. The only issue they had was, well, what happens if I tap this button and it goes wrong?
Yeah, they were worried about breaking it, weren't they?
Yeah,
rather than the process of doing it.
Yeah, which is it's an interesting one. So going back to that kind of developing a team, I think that highlights that you do need to have a whole range of people, because again, the NQTs in this example, the NQTs were very good with the tech, but they weren't good with their approach to it, whereas the older generation were more comfortable and at ease with the approach, but not with the tech. So again, it leads back to that support kind of angle to it.
Yeah, another interesting thing I've found on the team side of things is, sometimes schools will pick staff through authority. So they think, well, we're a big secondary school, we're going to have iPads across the board. It's really logical that we'll pick the department heads because they've got the biggest overview of the department. They probably have a very strong ground in the pedagogy skills. Yep. And most importantly, they've got the authority to get things done. What actually can happen is that, by giving it to someone with so much responsibility already, it's an extra burden for them that they simply don't have the time to develop. And sometimes when you give it to department heads or, teachers in higher positions in the school, it'll just become, the 9th or 10th thing down the list that they've got to do. Whereas if you give it to, classroom staff or NQTs or, teaching assistants, it's going to be one of the higher priorities that they've got. And that in itself can lead to more innovation and those guys taking a more active role in the team.
Yeah, and I think, you said about teaching assistants, I think that was a good one with that school we're talking about, was that the teaching assistants hadn't been thought of in the group. And then when we kind of mentioned, we said, well, you want to go and have a look at your support staff. When they were actually asked, they were like, yeah, oh crikey, no, we'd really love to do that kind of stuff. And then they were then linked to a subject teacher. So then the subject teacher then gave what would traditionally be support material, printed support material, to the TA. The TAs then had one-to-one with students, but then they were producing their own tutorials, their own videos, their own feedback resources. That then was then fed back to the staff. So it's actually alleviating the problem for the member of staff of actually creating resources because their TA was helping, which then freed them up to then look at how to use the iPad in the class.
Yeah, and I think that's a clever way to do it, isn't it?
Yeah.
I remember reading something a while ago and the Education Endowment Foundation released, and they said, teaching assistants at the moment, the way they're being used, don't provide good return on the investment, because these guys are a big cost. It's a wage that you're taking on every year. But they're basically being used in the classroom as entry-level workers really, help students with pieces of work, help the teacher delegate and those sorts of things, and they're not really being involved in planning the lessons, like the learning experience and the whole journey for the students in school. So technology is probably a good way to bring those guys on board in those early steps.
Totally.
Because I think one of the challenges is a lot of teaching assistants don't have a background in teaching themselves, so it might be beyond them to start planning lessons along with staff who maybe done it 20-30 years. So it probably leads to a bit of incompatibility in their skill sets. So maybe the tech projects can be something that bridges that gap. And closer together. And
again, it's that kind of the TAs are very good on one-to-one support. That the majority of higher TAs are trained in that kind of approach and that kind of response. And teachers don't have the time, although they're capable, don't have the time of creating those resources. So again, if you're introducing the tech at the same level or at the same time, you want it across the whole board. I think that's really good.
Okay, that's cool. Well, I think we'll take a quick break, listen to some music. Because we summed that section up, and then when we come back, we'll have a quick listen. We'll have a quick think about how we pick our players.
Cool.
Okay, so now we understand the sort of groups of people we got in the school. Who's going to have the time to invest in this project. We really need to think about picking our players, so picking from the staff we've got available from. So I think the first thing we should think about is, so how many people should we be getting on this team?
Well, that's a tricky one, because obviously big schools tend to want to put loads of people in and all this kind of stuff. Smaller schools tend to put the whole chunk of staff in. If we go to like the Apple training kind of catalogue, they have a stipulation of about 15 to 20 staff at training sessions. Mm-hmm. If you think about it in a classroom environment, when you've got a whole different range of students and abilities and ages and all that all in one classroom, it's very difficult at 20 students to be able to actually deliver everything and make sure everyone hits that. So, I would say, a development team or a project team should be somewhere between sort of 5 to 15 people. I think over sort of 10, it becomes a little bit watered down, a little bit difficult to track.
So the key is we want innovation, don't we? So the team is a sort of self-improvement mechanism within the school. Who's going to go away, going to research new apps, who's going to develop new practices. So we want these guys to work closely and collaboratively. So
and again, if you've got too many voices, and again, that's too many cooks thing, isn't it? It's too many voices shouting at each other all over the place. It just doesn't move forward. And again, I think the other approach to this, there's a school in Northampton we did some work with, and they had a digital leader team. But what they did is they had equal amount, not equal amounts. They basically made a mini version of the school hierarchy. So they had, say, 3 SLT, 2 faculty, and then 7 teachers or something like that, say. But the problem was that the SLT, everyone was looking towards them for the actual guidance, but because they were further away from the tech and further away from the classroom, they couldn't give that. But they still wanted to give that level of leadership. When actually, I think, you've got to have almost like equal say in where that goes. You leave your rank at the door kind of thing, and actually, the actual development of the project has to be kind of between, individuals as opposed to between leader and the led.
Yeah, so this is an interesting point, isn't it, about assigning responsibility. So a lot of schools are now sort of developing their iPad teams, or getting a sort of steering groups. So also a lot of schools also had ICT steering groups that are being sort of almost converted over for the iPad projects that they're undertaking. But a lot of them don't assign responsibility, and I think that is a blocker on how far they actually develop themselves on the project.
Yeah, totally.
You mentioned a good point about the standard authority should be left at the door when you go into these meetings, and really we should be setting up a set meeting space each week. So they can go in, they've got a set meeting place, and if it can be the same room as well, that helps, because you don't want, your job as the project leader really is to remove all the barriers for these guys to get together and do some great work together.
You don't want to be spending 2 hours trying to find a meeting room and then have 5 minutes to actually sit down and discuss something.
And the other interesting thing I saw from a school, I think it was in America who did it, so they elected a chairman of the group.
Okay.
So they had a team of 12 people. And it was made up of a whole host, so NQTs, regular teachers, some leadership members, ICT coordinators, stuff like that. So a big mix of ranges. And it was basically very apprentice style at the start of the task. So everyone put forward their reason why they should lead the team. And then there was a vote taken, and then that person would lead the team for a set amount of time, so usually a term at least.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I like that.
What then happened was, so that person then became the chairperson of the group. The project leader then didn't sit in on the committees and the organisation side of it. He just delegated and shared the vision, and it was up to the group to achieve that in the best way they could see fit. One of the interesting things of how that worked was it allowed the project leader to sort of steer the ship at the front. So they remained sort of out the, almost out the trenches side of things, where they were fighting the technical challenges. Teachers weren't coming to them asking about this and that. There wasn't app problems or anything like this. It got away from all the day-to-day troubleshooting. And they were free to think about the bigger picture stuff, which in that case was flipped learning, introducing, digital resources that were available anywhere online.
Yeah, those kind of ideas that you actually want to try, but you never get the chance to do.
Yeah, and doing some true curriculum development, which was tied into results improvements in that case. So the school had a very clear goal over 3 years that they wanted to increase results by something like 15% across the board.
Wow.
And about a year in, they'd already started achieving really, really good stuff. The other key to that one as well was that when, because someone stepped up and became chairperson, along with that, they got a bit of authority.
Yep.
So they could delegate tasks to other people. And they ran it like a real boardroom. So each week, after they met, if there was actions to be taken, they'd allocate them out to a member of the group. It could just be, go away and find some apps that we can use for literacy, or, go away and look at some storage solutions for students. Basic, simple things like that. But when the group met again the following time, it was their responsibility to bring that information back.
Yeah, and disseminate it back to the group.
Yeah, there was no room for excuses. So, there was no room for, we haven't had time to do this or that. And yeah, it worked really well, because by allocating that, those deadlines to people, it ensured that the train kept moving forward. The project just went from strength to strength, essentially.
Well, that's one thing when I used to sort of sit in meetings, because you always have allocated meeting times every week to do stuff, and that was the thing that was my biggest bugbear with meetings. Was you'd turn up, you'd have an agenda, because people get used to emailing out an agenda. It'd be an hour's meeting.
Yeah.
An hour and a half into the meeting, you still haven't covered those points, because the agenda item, although it's an agenda, it goes completely out the window. So again, I think the other thing with this is then having that kind of structure to everything that's then applied to everything. Because again, that wouldn't happen. You wouldn't be able to do those things you're talking about without having clear guidelines, and those meetings with an agenda, with an actual timing to it. And there's some really good stuff on lean, lean meetings and all this kind of stuff. I might have to have a bit of a podcast episode on something like that.
Yeah, so lean's a manufacturing process.
For the podcast people. But that kind of thing, different ways of structuring meetings, because as I say, the meetings that I've sat in before, some of them do go on a little while.
Yeah, well, teachers and schools are already time sensitive, aren't they? So anything they can do to sort of cut down on meetings.
Yeah, no, exactly.
The one I always say, I never agree to a meeting unless I've got an agenda.
Yeah,
that's a key one as well, because a lot of people do like sitting in meetings for the sake
long
of talking.
periods of time. Yeah, that's really good.
Okay, I think that sums it up pretty much, unless you get anything else to add.
I think that's good, dude. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so that kind of leaves us to sign off. So we'll be back next week. If you want to get in touch, leave a comment at the bottom of the YouTube thing, comment section. If you want to follow us on Facebook, it is facebook.com/LearnMakerUK. I am on Twitter at the LearnMaker,
and I'm at LearnMakerJ.
And that's it. Until next time.
Bye.